Welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. With President-elect Donald Trump now holding the reins of power, it is curious to see what will happen with the U.S. Japan relations. There are a couple of issues that are kind of teetering. Glenn, what do you think the hot buttons are?
Well, I think the immediate issues are TPP and Okinawa. And on TPP, Donald Trump has said throughout the campaign that he's against it. He thinks it's a terrible agreement, that it harms American workers, that if he becomes president, he will tear it up. So either he will withdraw it from the Congress and basically scrap it, or he may decide to totally renegotiate it. He said that on several occasions as well. So that's why it's interesting.
Easier said than done.
And yeah, it is. But it'll be interesting to see who he nominates to be the U.S. trade representative, because that person will be the point person on TPP. Mm-hmm. So TPP is one issue, and then the other issue is Okinawa. And on that, it'll be actually a test of what Donald Trump's administration's policy with Japan will be on the defense side.
Right. Does he put his money where his mouth is?
Yeah. So in terms of whether he puts his money or the Japanese money where the mouth is, and to what extent he wants to have U.S. forces in Okinawa, and what their roles and missions will be, and whether the Japanese side agrees with that or not. So it'll be an interesting kind of initial test of what is Donald Trump's real security policy with regard to Japan.
Two real huge bones of contention, TPP and Okinawa. We talk about TPP and Okinawa frequently on this show, and I wonder if the United States pulls back from TPP, where that leaves the Prime Minister.
I really don't know. Maybe I should throw that one to Dr. Snow.
I was actually curious about the role of Congress here, because we have now a Republican-controlled Senate and Republican-controlled House. And at one time we were thinking that would switch. So it's red across the board. In my thoughts moving forward, I could see an interest in Japan really rise in Japanese language studies and Japan studies in Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, because of what Trump has put on the table that will scare people into wanting to brush up on their public policy and their regional studies in this part of the world. So will then members of Congress, will there be more delegations coming over here? It would be, I wonder sometimes if part of having this set hand, Japan hands, if that kind of led to this plateau effect, or sort of, okay, it's the same faces, it's the same people we always hear from. And if you have some new people really looking at TPP, maybe renegotiating it, perhaps we could have a better deal. I mean, it's dead for now. I don't see it as dead altogether. But remember the way that Trump talks. I gave a talk on this at Temple in May. His persuasion and propaganda is always extreme, but he pulls it back in. So you have to expect that he's going to be pulling it back in because he's now president. He's about to take the oath of office. Right. So, of course, I don't know what's going to happen to his Twitter feed, but it's just, people are going to say, what has happened to this man? He's altogether different. But I think he's smart enough now to get smart people around him. So I'm going to play the optimist around the table today.
Well, clearly there's a paradigm shift that's going on. He strikes me as being more of a bilateral than a multilateral kind of person. He would prefer
business.
Business, one-on-one, instead of this conglomeration of trade deals. But I think the Prime Minister Abe, is going to go forward with TPP. It makes sense for the Japanese. Who knows what's going to happen with the Chinese, for example, if the United States pulls back?
Well, if the United States pulls back from TPP, the only thing that's on the table is RCEP, the Regional Cooperation Agreement. That's dominated by China. And that's something that folks in Washington are going to have to get used to. And that American influence, simply by electing Trump, American influence in this region of the world has plummeted. And it's not going to be fought back. It's not going to be clawed back by any kind of ambassador. If the person at the top does not have a faith, either in the intellectual capacities of the people who have been managing this relationship for so long, or in some intellectual capacities at all, I cannot tell you how much that is going to affect what's going to happen here. I mean, what's going to happen here is that in Kasumigaseki and in the Kante, inside the Prime Minister's residence, they're going to have to think about a more unilateral Japan working on its own to defend itself. It'll have to think about a higher defense spending. It will have to think about an even more liberated SDF than under the new security legislation. All these things are now on the table, which they never wanted to be on the table. They, in fact, were talking back the revision of the Constitution in Article 9. They're trying to ease off that this fall, and they were trying to not confront that issue. That issue has been slapped in their faces. The security of Japan is now in question.
Sure. Well, hasn't the Prime Minister kind of been preparing for that? He and Nippon Kaigi and wanting Japan to be more like it was before the war?
Well, as Dr. Snow says, there's a difference between talk and action. And whereas especially people in academia like myself have raised red flags perhaps way too often about the activities of Nippon Kaigi and about their radicalism, it's nothing as compared to what actually might be necessary to secure Japan's security when the United States is not reliable. And the United States, as of 2 days ago, is no longer reliable. And that's something that's going to take a long time for the people here in Tokyo to absorb.
Now, we'll have to wait and see, because Donald Trump at all the rallies talked about rebuilding the U.S. military and taking care of our veterans and really emphasizing national security. So I'm not so sure about all of this dramatic action that's going to take place. And I also think U.S. influence in this part of the world is going to be bigger than ever, because he is going to be a magnetic personality to a lot of foreign leaders. China was very quick to congratulate President-elect Trump. I think they were the first. So China feels like it can work with this new administration.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, the Okinawa issue has been a longstanding bone of contention. And coming in and making just a couple of tweaks, I think would generate a lot of benefit for the president, for the president-elect, and also for the Japanese-U.S. relationship.
I'll have to toss that to
But I think he can do that. I think he will do that.
Do it with grace?
Sure.
What do you think, Glenn?
Well, I think one of the reasons that China welcomes President Trump is they think that he's a businessman and pragmatic, and therefore will basically base his decisions on economic
benefit
factors, and that he's not ideological. He doesn't have principles. Whereas I think the Chinese believe, probably rightly, that Hillary Clinton is someone who does believe in human rights, does believe in women's rights, and therefore is likely to be more difficult to deal with, as opposed to a more business-friendly, pragmatic Donald Trump.
Predictable.
But here's the thing. The thing that's interesting about Donald Trump is that he's repeatedly said, the problem with America is too predictable. And so the way he thinks, I think, based on his speeches and his writings, is that if you're a businessman and you want to negotiate a deal, you don't show all your cards on the table, because, if you do so, then the other guy's going to take advantage of you. So you have to always be unpredictable, always keep the other guy guessing as to what you're going to do. So it's going to be interesting to see how he translates this into alliance relationships, because an alliance fundamentally assumes that you have to be able to rely on your partner to be reliable and predictable. But he's saying that that's not a good thing.
Well, it's reliable and predictable in the 20th century and the first part of the 21st. Whereas in the 19th century, alliances were very fluid and based entirely on national interest. As Lord Gladstone said, England doesn't have friends and enemies. We have enduring national interests. And that's the line of thought that I think Donald Trump will bring to it. Sure. The United States has its national interests, so that the alliance structure that has existed, which is based on the thought that you're my buddy and you'll have my back, we're in the Marine Corps together. No. Hi, I'm your friend, but tomorrow, maybe not. And that is a really radical revisiting of the
So it makes it difficult
thing.
for Japan to plan with certainty, and therefore they have to probably plan with in the worst case scenario.
Well, the worst case scenario involves, I think, the Senkaku Islands. President Obama, speaking to the Yomiuri Shimbun, guaranteed that Article 5 applies in the case of anyone.
We will be there.
We will be there for you to defend the Senkakus. I would really be very surprised to see a Donald Trump statement of that nature.
And so what will that imply for Japan?
And what will that imply for Japan is that Japan will have to defend
Kiss
those
goodbye.
Yeah, that's what I mean by worst case scenario.
This is a worst case scenario
Yep.
because it is a matter of principle for the Japanese. And it is a matter of self-defense and territoriality, even though, yes, they're not worth fighting a war for. Wars start for even less than that.
Sure.
Time for some studies here in Japan in risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and creativity and critical thinking. All of these classes will come to the fore now with the Trump administration. So this is a time to amp it up and for independent minds to prevail.
I agree. A new ball of wax, America First, the presidency of Donald Trump. We are going to continue to watch this and report it to you, what this means to the U.S.-Japan relationship and Japan in Asia. Stay tuned.